Good morning. Meditation Amsterdam is back with a video. And today I'm going to be expanding on an idea that came up in a previous video of how your brain is kind of like a radio that can tune into different stations. And so I was mentioning in that video how your brain is composed of different parts. They're actually physically discrete parts, right? So, for example, the part that gives you anxiety is a discrete little, pea-sized bit of tissue called the amygdala, for example, right? And there's bits and pieces that are in charge of critical thinking. There's pieces that are in charge of visual perception and so on. And so you have all these different parts, and one of the things that make them interesting is that they have evolved across time, so that the deeper parts of your brain, the ones that are really closest to the brainstem, and even the brainstem itself, which is here at the base of the cranium, this element of the brain is known as the reptilian brain, because back in the day during our evolution, when we were reptiles, that's all you really needed, right? All you really needed was a kind of some sort of little module that allowed you to coordinate your body to move, seek light, seek heat, seek food, and run away from things that were moving quickly at a certain angle, for example. So it was a very primitive, and it's still a very primitive part of the brain. That's what's interesting about it. It's not that it was primitive when we were evolving and we were just reptiles. It's that it's still as primitive as it was back then. And then you have the more the midbrain, and there you have, of course, the entire sort of mammalian brain with all the emotions and stuff like that. And then finally, of course, you have your prefrontal cortex, which is this bit over here, right? And the motor cortex and the sensory cortex are kind of across the brain on the top, and then your prefrontal cortex, that's where the higher functions of planning, empathy, coordination, those kind of things are taking place. And at the very, very front, you have your conscious attention, so that you can, and your will, right? So if you work on that, which is what you work on during meditation, your willpower and your stability of attention become very stable. But not only that, in the process of doing that, you are constantly discarding distractions from every other part of the brain. And when you do that, you're starting to integrate all those different parts of the brain so that they can talk to one another. Because the reptile doesn't speak English, right? And the emotional one doesn't speak logic, right? And so on. So they don't speak to one another. They all do their thing. Now, what I was suggesting in this previous video is that you can think of all those different parts of the brain and all those modes. Let's put this thing on mute, because it's going to be annoying us. So you can think of these parts of the brain as having their function. But you can think of each of them as being a kind of radio station, right? And each of them is broadcasting a certain message. And when you are listening to that certain radio station, it colors your entire reality. So that if you are stuck in the radio station that is broadcasting anxiety in the brain, your reality becomes anxiety. So your brain kind of wraps itself around that part, and it kind of like, it just colors everything you do. So it's like the soundtrack became scary, and then everything is painted in that light. All right. And the same goes for the emotional part of the brain. So when your emotions are flaring up, as in, like, you're very sad or angry or whatever, you've tuned into that station, and typically what then happens is your mind just wraps itself around that reality, and then your outside world and everything you do sort of becomes colored by those glasses that you're wearing, the emotional glasses at that moment, and everything just becomes like that. So the brain has that peculiar capacity that it kind of wraps itself around the things, the impulses that it perceives outside or even in its own mode of working. And then the same goes for the logical part of the brain, right? When you are in full logical mode, everything seems logical and everything seems like, okay, it needs to make logical sense. And, this is not sharp enough. What's the proof, right? Like, what's the root cause? And let's divide this thing and categorize it and whatever, right? So, and make a diagram. So that kind of thing. And almost immediately you start to see how like that approach cannot be understood by the emotional brain or the fearful brain or the more primitive brain. So they are modes of operation of the brain that don't really talk to one another. But again, the interesting part is that each of them creates a reality for you when you are fully immersed in it, right? So you become fully immersed in the logical thinking mode of the brain, and that's all there is. Now, when you start to practice meditation and all these self-realization techniques, what you start to do is you start to acquire distance from all of those, and you are almost kind of sitting at the center. So you become the center of conscious awareness that kind of dips its toes into logical thinking or emotions or fear and things of that kind. And that is really interesting because in modern society, we have kind of become enamored with the idea that the logical brain, the thinking brain, the logical man, that's the superior mode, right? Like we think like, emotions, yeah, they're kind of unpredictable and they color your world in a weird way, and that's, they cannot be demonstrated, and it's all over the place. So that's stuff not good. That mushy stuff, not good. Fear and all that kind of thing. Fear, anger, unpleasant. That's super unpleasant. Whatever. Aggression, God forbid, right? Like, that's totally unacceptable, unpleasant. It needs to be dampened, and we don't want fear. Feels ugly, so we don't. Logic, on the other hand, the clear light of logic, right? When you have clear thinking, you can see causes one after the next, and you can very cleanly categorize things. And now your world has become clean and clinical and correctly understood. It can be logically demonstrated and predictable. And yeah, that's the way to go. That's the superior one. But if you think about it, so you would think that the way to mastery of the mind and mastery of the self is just to become the most logical person that you can become. Well, and then you would have your answer. So you just pile up more knowledge, right? You memorize more things, you become more strictly logical, and then you're done with the whole thing. Well, I mean, I think you can already start to see, how that would be sort of dysfunctional, right? Like if you're at a funeral, for example, your logical mind is just not going to serve you very well there. You need to sort of amp up your empathy mode. You need to become attuned with your environment and see how people are responding and so on, and sort of, embody something different than the thinking, the radio station of the thinking mind of the sort of professor that just thinks very straight. And so what you can then start to see is that if you are aiming for mastery of the mind and full self-realization, what you do through meditation is you start to see all these different radio stations for what they are. And you are, the thinking mind and the emotional mind and the fearful mind, they all have a lot of power. Each of them are almost kind of sort of competing for attention. And when something happens in the environment or you remember something, one of them just flares up and goes like, I'm therefore reality is like this. Reality is emotional. I hereby declare, right? And you go, oh crap, yeah, and it really feels that way because your mind has wrapped around itself around the emotional thing, and it's like, I guess it is, right? And when you're working on a logical problem at work, the thinking mind goes, nope, I hereby declare reality is rational. and then your mind wraps itself around that, and it makes you feel like, yeah, I guess that's true. I guess reality is a logical thing, right? And there's nothing else really. But what a master what a realized master does is to see these things for what they are, and what that allows you to do is to shift across these states at will, and to choose, consciously choose, and maybe when you become really good, just unconsciously naturally flow to the most appropriate state at a given point in time, right? So for example, right now I am sort of somewhat upbeat, somewhat logical. I need to make some sense, right? And just generally interested in the topic, right? That's my current state of mind. I'm not trying to like oversell. I'm not like one of those people who put stuff on YouTube who thinks they need to be uber entertaining or whatever. Whatever, that's different style. But I'm also not like, yes, this is the very serious topic of mind control, right? So there's a certain calibration. You're calibrated to the moment, very finely calibrated to the moment. So that mastery of mind is one where you choose, despite of the environment and despite of your inner chatterbox saying, no, things are emotional, things are fearful, things are logical. You just go, thank you very much. I've listened to all of you and I've seen what's happening around me, but there's a kernel of conscious awareness in me that is now going to pick the radio station that puts my system best in tune with the outcome that I want. So, you could also think of it as a gearbox in a car, right? Now, in the West, or rather in modern society, because there's no such thing as the West anymore, but in modern society, we have glorified fifth gear, right? And so, you just like work hard, play hard, you achieve, you do all these kind of things, whatever. And why would you not be progressing as fast as possible? It's like, why would you not, right? Like, why would you not have like the most exciting, rich life with as much of, things and friends and entertainment and achievements as possible? Like, why would you choose anything other than that, right? It's like, max out on it, just go all out and then die. All right, so fifth gear is considered the superior gear. It's like, why would you be on fourth? Just go to fifth. What are you doing on fourth? Second gear, are you kidding me? It's like, yeah, you can dip your toes into that for a while, but it's like, screw it. And first, no, forget it, man. First gear is like, that's you're a loser, and it's like it doesn't compute, right? And so you glorify fifth gear. Now, what's most interesting about this is that, it's your ability to switch from one to the other and choose the exact right gear. Just like when you're driving, right? If you drive stick, you're coming up a hill, you go back into second gear, and then you that's what gives you the torque and the stability to go up the hill. So there's a value to that. You can't try to do that in fifth gear, and in modern society, part of the problem that we have is we're trying to approach every road and every section of the road with the same gear. It just really doesn't work. That's why people burn themselves out, and why they come across all kinds of like weird situations where you're just not in tune with what's going on, because you carry a certain momentum of called fifth gear or the logical mind, that the and approaching everything in a single way. And it's just like, no, it doesn't work that way. Someone who's a master of their mind switches between gears according to the moment, right? So when it's time to party, it's like logic is not going to help you there. I have seen professionals who in the meeting room are spectacular, true professionals. They approach things in a logical way, they call the shots or whatever. But you put them in a social environment, in a party, and they just stand with a kind of grumpy, confused face in the corner, and they're utterly incapable. It's just like that environment it's foreign to them. And what is interesting is that you could then put that on, but that's their personality. They're really like, they're very logical, introverted types. I don't believe that for a moment. What it means is that their personality has grown around being stuck in a single mode of mind, as opposed to being versatile in your mind, so that you can switch across. Now, just as with the analogy of the of the committee of the brain with the single parts and you being the conscious center of attention, the same goes for the analogy of the gearbox. So instead of glorifying the different gears, it is your ability to switch between them that's good. And what allows you to do that is you need to know the neutral in your gear, right? Like if you don't know the neutral position in the gearbox, you can switch between gears. So as it turns out, the neutral position in the gearbox is the most powerful and the most crucial part of the gearbox that you can come to know. Because by being in that one, you can then go like, okay, there's a situation here. I'm going back to neutral, full neutrality, full center of conscious observation. And from here I go, it looks like this is a third gear, 30% emotional, add a little bit of logic situation, and the fear stuff, that's completely out. So we switch into third. And now you are fully calibrated to the moment. Your level of logic, your level of focus, your level of arousal, right? Sometimes you're too excited for the situation. Sometimes you're just not excited enough, right? You calibrate your brain to the situation and to the outcome that you want out of it, as opposed to simply input is coming in, your brain by default switches into full-on logical mode, and you become a robot in what is otherwise a fun or emotionally delicate situation. You are not attuned with what's going on. And that's because you are either too familiar or too stuck in one mode of the brain, or you don't have enough distance from the impulse and the brain reaction to go like, oh, this is, what does this feel? Why does this feel weird? You just keep going on, and the reason it feels weird is because you are not calibrated to the situation. You are in the wrong brain mode for that situation. So yeah, it's kind of an appeal to notice that that there are different parts of the brain. Each of them creates a different mode of operation in you. They all have their value. So you've heard me sort of pounding on fear, like, oh, that's the bad thing. But actually, if you're about to be mugged, the adrenaline jolt that you get from the amygdala going all out is probably going to save your life, right? So that's the appropriate response at that moment. You don't want to dampen that and go into like, I wonder. It's not appropriate. So each of them have their value. Each of them tends to color your reality, all right? So once you tune into the radio station of fear, your reality is colored by fear completely. And the purpose of someone who wants to master their mind is to be able to step back from each of those radio stations or gears, to step back, and as opposed to becoming completely enmeshed in it and identified with it, you step back and you go, okay, there's a situation here, and the response of the brain has been fear. Very good. Now, if I continue with this, do I get the outcome I want? Well, let's see. Well, I'm getting mugged, so fear is the right response. So yes, I get the outcome I want because I have more strength and I'm like in full adrenaline mode. But if I'm in a boardroom or in a family situation and suddenly an anxiety attack flares up, it's like, well, this is out of tune, right? Like, this is not the radio station that I need right now. I'm in second gear, but I need to be in fourth. So you observe that. You're not going to fight with it. I mean, then you get into techniques of how to switch. But the most important technique to be able to switch is the ability to step back and go into neutral mode, right? And go, oh, this is going on. And to not identify fully with the different radio stations of the brain or the different gears. Because each of them thinks that that's what it's all about. That's their job, right? When the brain switches into fear, the fear center of the brain is meant to do that. It can't see any other reality. You can't speak to it in logic or emotion. It's just raw sensation, raw fear. The same goes for the emotional part of the brain. So to communicate with those, you need to learn certain techniques to do that. And you need to learn techniques to switch between them and just to amp yourself up or calm yourself down or become more focused, become more logical. according to what's going on. Yeah, and so learning to speak to these different centers of the brain is also a very interesting, quite rewarding thing to learn, as a matter of fact. It's the user's manual to the damn thing, right? If you don't have that, it's just pulling you all over the place. This is not just about it. A big part of it is, of course, willpower, mental discipline, but a big part of it is just understanding what's going on, right? Just being able to recognize and go like, oh, I know what's flaring up right now. That's interesting. And it's coloring my reality. Damn, you know, that's also interesting, right? But I know, because I was having fun 5 minutes ago, and I'll be having fun maybe in half an hour from now. I know that this current fearful or emotional moment, it doesn't color all of reality. It just seems to, but it's more like the weather. It's like a cloud that's going by. So I'm gonna let it go by. So you learn to recognize the different parts of what the different parts of your brain are doing. You learn to interact with them. You learn to take them for what they're worth, not too seriously. You learn to slip into them when you need to, slip out of them when you want to. That's mental mastery. So yeah, so this is a kind of video about the radio stations of your brain, or the different gears in your brain, and how we have glorified a certain one, or in modern society, mainly thinking and like work hard, play hard mode. And how also individually we tend to kind of be stuck in one of these, right? And that affects our versatility and our ability to enjoy life, because we are very one-dimensional in that sense. I was reading somewhere, I can't remember where, it was a quote actually, which stated that that things go even further than that, because we're even talking about waking regular states of consciousness. So far, I haven't even gone beyond that. So there's a band of regular states of consciousness here, which includes, you know, everything you experience in the wakeful state. Logical thinking, fear, emotion, whatever. That's still a fairly narrow band. So we have difficulty, like if you don't master your mind, you have difficulty even moving within that band. Yeah. But what somebody was stating the other day is that in indigenous societies and in you know, other societies, they expand the band way further than that, through the use of hallucinogen drugs, or through conscious dreaming and things of that kind. So the band of experience and the states of the brain that you can slip into becomes way broader than that. I mean, we haven't even gone into that. We're just looking at the wakeful, normal, beta wave conscious state in which you're busy with things, thinking about that, doing something, whatever. We haven't even gone into enhanced states of consciousness. And so in the West, we live in the wakeful thinking, doing state. Like our band is very narrow, and even within that, we're typically personally just stuck in, like, you know, 1 or 2 modes at the very most, whereas there's a very broad band of states of consciousness that you can go for. But that's a bit of a different story. We can start with the narrow part first and just gain some mobility here, so that you are more in tune with what's going on, more effective, also more happy. So that was the thought of the day, and I'll be back with more. Cheers.